So I've been doing a lot of HDMI modifications for older systems like the Dreamcast, the Nintendo 64, or even the original Xbox. And while I have been doing modifications on the Game Boy Color, or the Game Boy Advance, today I want to do something a bit different. I wanted to take a Game Boy Advance and turn it into a full-on console with an HDMI modification. Guys, if you enjoyed these videos, make sure the like button helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below.
Today's video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN. With the holiday season now in full swing, protecting yourself online is more important now than ever before. Shopping online can leave you exposed to all kinds of threats with data collection, malicious websites, and phishing attempts. That's where Surfshark VPN comes in. Using Surfshark VPN masks what you do online and is super easy to use. With just a few clicks, you'll be set up with a virtual private network that will allow you to surf the web with peace of mind and confidence. Using Surfshark VPN will also let you change your virtual location to unblock streaming platforms in your region like Netflix or Hulu. Some shopping websites will even show certain prices and deals based on your location. I think one of the most important things you can do now in the digital era is to protect your information and data when browsing the web. So make sure you check out Surfshark VPN at the link below in the description and use code SpawnWave for 83% off and 4 extra months for free. Once again, thanks to Surfshark VPN for sponsoring today's video.
Now, earlier this year, I had ordered something called the GBA Consolizer, and the idea is it will take a Game Boy Advance system you have right now and turn it into a full-on console with HDMI out, supporting modern displays now. It also allows you to use probably one of the best controllers ever made, that being the Super Nintendo controller, one that is certainly suited well for Game Boy Advance games. So let's get the kit, break down a Game Boy Advance, and see how it all goes together.
First thing up is breaking down our GBA system. The nice thing about this mod is we don't need a particularly good looking system, since all we really need here is the board. The screen can even be completely destroyed so long as the Game Boy does boot up. Typical tri-wing screws hold the backing down, and the motherboard has a couple of screws itself. Otherwise, we just have a ribbon cable at the top for the LCD to remove, and the board comes free. From here, we have some prep work to do on the board. Now, I'm not looking to create the most comprehensive tutorial for this video, so I will leave a link to an in-depth guide on putting this mod together start to finish in the description. I mostly just wanted to go over my thoughts of the install and the final product here. Anyway, a few things we need to do include removing the speaker, battery pins, bridging the audio dial, and the power switch. This way, neither will be able to affect the system when it's put into its console form, since the audio will be passed through to HDMI, and we will be installing a different power switch. With that done, we can start to line up our ribbon cable to the main chip on the GBA board. This is one of the best parts about this new kit that released recently. It eliminates the need for tons of wires running all over the board, and instead replaces it with the pin solder cables that we've seen many times before with these HDMI mods that we've done right here on the channel. It does require a bit more skill with the soldering iron, but I think the results look much cleaner in the end. As with the other mods I've done, I like to start by tacking one side down after lining things up and then work my way around. Drag soldering works really well here, and you can just clean up any bridge pins with some solder braid to finish up. 2 more cables need to be soldered to the ribbon and then connected to each terminal on the battery connectors for power. Then we need to connect the Super Nintendo controller port to the consolizer board. I think it's strange that it doesn't come already attached, since it's an easy process and just feels like an extra unnecessary step for the end user.
For the controller, I just decided to go with an SN30 from 8BitDo rather than a Super Nintendo controller, mostly because it's wireless and it does have a great feel to it, still keeping that same idea of the Super Nintendo controller intact, just a more modernized spin on it.
The power switch is up next and requires 3 wires to be attached to the main board. Now we just need to connect the LCD port to the consolizer board with a ribbon cable, and the fun part is up next, which is where we try to assemble the entire thing all at once. Even with some of the small soldering, this is the part that gave me the most trouble, and I'm still not sure if it went together correctly due to some creaking in the case and some gaps between the side panels. See, the idea here is to slowly drop the board into the case while making sure all sides line up without the use of any screws. It's cool that it just snaps together, since it's basically toolless at this point, but it makes for an awkward and frustrating final push to complete. But with everything locked in and the top lid on, we're ready for the first impression.
So immediate impressions of this, right away. It looks incredible. Like, visually speaking, on a TV, of course you're blowing up a Game Boy Advance picture that is supposed to be on a screen that's this size, but All that said, this is putting out a 720p picture and it looks super clean. They have some other options, like you can go in here to this menu and you can kind of explore it a bit where they have picture. You can smooth things out a bit with a couple of different options here. You can do different zooms. So you can go like 5x, which zooms all the way in to fill up the entire screen, a 4x or a 4.5x. I was leaving it on 4.5 because it fills up the screen from top to bottom here. Then you can also play around with color for GBA, Game Boy Color. Let's see, GBA. I think that just kind of softens it a little bit, dims it slightly. They have scan lines as well. And you can also go in the system and play around as well. You have to move DVI plus. You have to turn that on to get sound. Otherwise, though, this is just a really good experience playing a Game Boy Advance game on the TV through HDMI using a Super Nintendo or an 8BitDo SN30 controller. These games, while they were on the smaller screen, I think still translate over pretty well to a larger display, especially since a lot of the games at the time were kind of these isometric top-down style or side-scrolling. Mario Kart Super Circuit is pretty funny because when you blow it up on a bigger screen like this and they're trying to pull off that faux 3D look, I mean, you can just start counting the pixels right now, but I think for what it is and the source they're pulling from, the Consolizer does a pretty good job with this game. Again, these are games, especially something like this, that they're expecting you to see on a pretty small screen. Next up, we have Super Mario Bros. Deluxe, and I wanted to check out a Game Boy Color game as well on the Consolizer, and it's kind of funny because it does just take up like this center part of your screen, but obviously different aspect ratio for the Game Boy Color compared to the Game Boy Advance, and I guess it'd be weird if they tried to stretch it out too much. But the funny thing about that is you feel like you're missing so much of the screen, like to the right of Mario, which it was already kind of like that, but because you're on the Game Boy Color, you don't have this feeling of, wow, you're missing so much of the screen on either side because it filled up the square Game Boy Color screen. Nonetheless, it does its job here. I mean, it looks great in terms of colors, and it runs well. It's running off of an actual Game Boy Advance board, so you wouldn't expect any compatibility issues. One of the better looking Game Boy Advance games you can pick up is certainly Golden Sun. Just the color palette and how well the game itself pops with its visuals are awesome. It was one I wanted to check out immediately here, and yeah, it looks really good. Still blown up here on the TV. I think this is a game that pulls it off really well. One you definitely want to have added to your collection, by the way, because it is still a very good RPG to go through now. And here's hoping Nintendo remembers that this franchise still exists so we can get a new one. Now with all that done, let's talk a little bit about the GBA Consolizer itself. The system is pretty cool. Like the idea of being able to have a Game Boy Advance console with HDMI out and probably one of the cleanest looking pictures you'll get out of this board is cool. But there is a couple of issues with this kit. One, the casing. The casing unfortunately feels extremely cheap. It's 3D printed. These are essentially created as they are ordered, and when they get to enough, they then ship them out and complete the order. That's why it took so long to get them. So they have that handmade feel to it. But unfortunately, that does translate over to the casing. There's no screws holding this together either. So the whole thing has kind of that loose 3D printed creak to it, where if you move it around a little bit in your hands, you'll get kind of that creaking sound. That said, I guess if you put it up somewhere because it's a console, you're not gonna be grabbing it or touching it too much other than just put a game in and out of it when you wanna change them. The build itself isn't bad. In fact, the hardest part, I would say, is getting everything to fit inside this case after you solder it all together and get all of the prep work done. You have ribbon cables winding around. You're concerned they might pinch one by accident and just ruin everything. I know they're trying to fit a lot into this casing in a particular way, but it all ends up feeling very awkward when you're just trying to basically smash this together. Oh, and USB-C and mini HDMI. These are two things that are unfortunate that we have here because I'd much prefer a full HDMI port and a USB-C port. I know the full HDMI port could have some concerns around size where they get this all to fit just right with the mini HDMI port, but I would say the mini USB would be much better off just being USB-C, and I don't see any real size constraints around that anyway. But all that said, I do like what this kit is able to accomplish, which is taking a Game Boy Advance motherboard, which would give you full compatibility, and turning it into a little console with full HDMI out. It helps to modernize the overall experience while keeping that original feeling intact. And I like the idea of also being able to use the Super Nintendo controller of my choice. So if I want to go with a wireless one that plugs in here like this SN30, I can do that. Now the pricing might be a bit high for a lot of people, considering it's still high despite having to go through all of this to get to this point. There are services you can go through, but you can also probably get a GameCube, the Game Boy player, the deck, and go that route. This is just something really cool to be able to do, and I'm happy to add it to my collection. But let me know what you guys think about the GBA Consoleizer down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.